Dave Bartek, Greg Hendrix, Athletek Baseball. Off-season's in session. Spring season right around the corner. For you guys who need more information on pitching development programs, arm care, strength programs, getting yourself right for the season, be sure to click the link below. We got plenty of information for you guys, and we got a facility full of guys getting after it right now. Make sure you're putting in the work. Welcome to the Juice Box Athletek Podcast, Baseball Development Show. We've got an interesting topic for you guys today. I'm going to talk about cold weather baseball. You know, here we are in the pretty much the beginning stages of winter. You know, we're in the middle of the off season. Guys are getting ready to, enter into their spring seasons here in a few weeks. And we were just talking about the weather change and how it's finally starting to get cold down here in Atlanta, Georgia. And we were kind of reminiscing on some of our coldest baseball games, practices, just encounters in general, being outside in the elements. So wanted to give you guys some insight and just, some of the things that we used to have to do when we played to try to stay warm, try to stay ready, all that stuff. So, for you, like, honestly, for me, Coach, like, I remember some of my coldest games actually being down here in the South, not necessarily in the North, which everybody would assume, okay, if you're playing baseball, like, up north is probably the coldest games, which maybe that's true. But some of the times when I felt the coldest was actually playing down here in the South. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, really, when it's cold down here, cold is cold, I mean, it gets pretty cold down here. Like, in February is probably our coldest month, right? And then that's when everything starts for high school and college. And if you look at, like, a really cold day in February down here, it's probably not that much different than a really cold day. And we get that wet cold.
It's the worst.
The wet cold, like, I'm keep thinking back to playing in Missouri and everything, and it gets cold up there, but I feel like they don't get as much of that wet cold. Maybe it's like it's a little bit
one of the
dry.
coldest games that I remember. If my mom listens to this, she's going to remember this too. It was like the end of February down in Florida, my freshman year of high school. So we're talking 2004. I'm dating myself for you guys. We were playing Seabreeze High School. So it was like one of our crosstown rivals. And what we used to do, I was on JV. I was early in our freshman year. We would do JV would play at like 4 or whatever, and then varsity would play at 7. Or maybe it was 5 and 7. I don't remember what the times were, but JV would play, afternoon, early evening. Varsity would play, the nightcap. And it was like one of those years. Honestly, when I was in high school, freshman, sophomore, junior year of high school, I don't know what it was, but Florida got really cold. Like, we were in Central Florida, so Daytona Beach area, about 100 miles south of Jacksonville. And we moved in 2001 when I was in 7th grade. And I remember my 8th grade year, it snowed. It was 26 or 29 degrees or something, and it snowed. And I was like, we moved from Montana. I'm like, I didn't know it freaking snowed here. So it snowed. And freshman year, same thing, got super cold. It was one of those, like, we were playing Seabreeze, so it's kind of funny, but it was one of those, like, windy, like, wind coming off the beach.
I remember that.
Damp, just wet. And it was probably 40 or 41 degrees. I swear it felt like it was 25. And I weighed probably 110 pounds at the time, 115-pound freshman.
Cutting you
like,
straight
just
in half.
right through me, man. And, like, the thing was, when we played, man, you wore your jersey. You wore an undershirt. You wore some thin sleeves. They didn't really have, like, cold gear was just coming in.
Out. Yeah.
Everybody had the thin gear, the heat gear.
Right.
And I'm like, this is not doing anything. Nowadays people have, teams wear sometimes hoodies with their names on the back, which is bull crap. Like, you play baseball in the cold, you wear your freaking jersey and you figure out a way to get warm underneath. But I remember literally just having my hands on my you know what inside my pants
Mm-hmm.
most of the game in the dugout and whatever else if I wasn't in the field and I wasn't hitting, and just feeling miserable. And again, like this is February 18th, February 20th. I don't know the exact date when it was. I could probably look it up, but the sun started going down. You know, when the sun started going down, man, it got really bad. And then I remember hanging around for the varsity game after because it was a big game. It was Spruce Creek and Seabreeze. And just being so cold, like watching the game, obviously you're a JV guy, you're hanging out in the dugout, you're watching the game, but not really being able to focus on anything. And I remember getting home that night and my mom being like absolutely frozen, just like still in the house, like sitting in the house after being there for 2 hours, like frozen from the game.
Just thawing out.
Thawing out, man.
Two out,
And that
two more
was,
out.
man, that was cold. That was
Mm-hmm.
cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just baseball's not really meant to be played in that kind of weather, but
No.
you know, it's just you got to get through it. You know, like those games count just the same as the games in April and May. You know,
Well, you know,
unless it's
and everybody's
playoffs,
got to
but-
play. Like, it's not like, oh, you know, this is unfair advantage for this team because they got to play in it. Both teams got to play in it.
right.
So
Yeah,
that's the way you got to look at it.
You know, it's you know, I feel like it got to me. It didn't get to me as much when I was younger. You know, I think it gets to you a little more the older you get. Maybe it's, you know, especially if you're not really acclimated to it. I mean, you know, I know it, like you see a lot of these like major leaguers like now, you know, you got the World Series going later.
Mm-hmm. Into
And
November.
everything. Yeah, like you got the playoffs a little bit later. Like these guys are playing in some cold games at the end of the year, and it's like you kind of have to empathize with them a little because I mean, you know, like they're freaking pampered major league players. Like most of them are training in the off season in Arizona.
Well, and 95% of the season
Florida,
is the dog days of summer. It's
Right.
hot out everywhere you go, whether you're in Chicago, Arizona, Florida, Baltimore. Like, it's hot. The
Yeah.
summertime's hot, you know. And then you get to that end of the season. It's like, okay, we're supposed to be playing the best baseball we've been playing all year. Oh shit, we got to do that in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and not to mention spring training, wherever you go, is hot as Hades. Whether you're in Arizona or whether you're in Florida.
It's pretty. You tends to be pretty ideal weather, right? Like, because it's just starting to
early in the spring.
It's just starting. You know, it's just starting to kind of warm up a little bit. So you get kind of the nice like tail end of the winter weather, but yeah. You know, I mean it depends. More teams are starting to go out to Arizona because it's like beautiful out there in February.
Different climate for sure. Not as much rain to deal with. Obviously, a little drier.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny we were mentioning just how that cold when you're in Florida or even here, or on the coast in the South, how that cold cuts through you. I remember it was
the wind, yeah.
The wind and just the damp air.
Yeah.
Like I said, that game I was telling you about, it was 40 or 41 degrees and felt like it was one of the coldest games ever. It was funny because when I was in Ohio playing my freshman year of college, I think we played 7 games that year where it snowed. There were snow flurries coming down.
Yeah.
And obviously that was early in the year. That was pretty much March. February, the end of February, I think we went down south and played. We played 10 games, like it was either Florida or Myrtle Beach. I think we played at the Cal Ripken Complex. We played some teams down there in like a little jamboree, and then we went to Methodist in North Carolina and North Carolina Wesleyan, and then winded up playing at Averett to finish up the trip. And when we got back, it was still cold. I'm like, dude, is this cold ever going to go away? So like I said, man, in March, playing games where it was snowing. And like I said, I counted 7 of them that year we played in the snow. So I remember the first game where I felt warm. We played a game at the Chillicothe Stadium on the turf. I think we played against Marietta. We had a series.
That's because we were just talking about the Caps.
Chillicothe
So they're
Paints.
the Paints.
Yep.
Like they're in that same kind
league.
of that same
Okay.
league.
Yeah.
Like kind of the same kind of team.
Yeah.
As the Cape Girardeau.
Okay. Right.
Capitals. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we were able to use that. We had to travel. It was like an hour away, if I remember right. But we used to have to drive down there if our field was too crappy, whether that was rain or snow or whatever else. So we probably played 10 games there that season, like until it got warm enough to play on our field. And we played Marietta down there. I think it was like maybe a 1 o'clock and a 3 o'clock doubleheader. The sun was out. And when I say 48 degrees, I'm not exaggerating. That was probably the temperature. And it felt like sunny and 75.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have that cool, damp, windy air. The sun was shining. It was on turf. So you kind of got that turf heat coming up.
That time change does help.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the time change. I'm thinking about some of these games, and it double header, and it's like you maybe have a little bit of daylight for the first half of that first game, and then
you're playing at night.
Dark.
Yeah. So, yeah, man. But it was crazy to me because I'm like, oh, this is t-shirt weather almost.
Right. I mean,
you know, and that was funny coming from me because I was always the one, on that team that was like, I'm cold, and that was like, I'm taking my sleeves off today. This feels good.
Yeah, I'm right. I'm the same. I was always the same way. I'm kind of cold natured to begin with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I never pitched great in the cold in college.
Well, I mean, dude, you had to pitch in it. Like,
yeah,
it's a whole different ball, and I'm sure there's pros and cons to both pitching in the cold versus being a position player in the cold. But I know for me, the worst part was, especially if you were playing outfield, you were getting 2 balls that game, and you're going to spend half the game in the field, and you're going to spend another quarter of the game not up to bat or doing anything. So you didn't get to do much, and you had to find a way to like keep your legs loose, like keep yourself moving. Like for me, I played a speed game, so like I had to be able to run. When I was playing infield, I had to be able to throw. Like that part was so tough. Like I could see where maybe being a starting pitcher, your task is a little bit easier because you're moving more often, right? You have the breaks in between innings to go sit in the dugout and whatever else, but at least when you're out there on the bump, you're pretty much moving that full half inning. I could see where that would be a benefit. Now, as a reliever, probably be brutal.
Right.
What was that like?
Well, yeah, I was a starter through college, so I did have that luxury of, and thinking about it more as you're talking, the worst part was not so much the body, being cold or anything, because you get moving and your body temperature warms up, but just the issues with the grip in the ball, just getting a good feel for the ball in those temperatures was kind of the struggle for me, I guess.
And this is probably something that you can shed some light on too, but talking about gripping the ball, all right, so let's say you got 40 degrees, damp, cool, windy air, and you've got 40 degrees kind of dry northern temperatures with the sunlight out. Like, how's that going to affect it? Because it's like, okay, you're probably glad if you're in the damp temperatures because your hands are not so dry.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, when it's a damp cold, your fingers almost have like that clammy feel too. So it's kind of like a catch-22. It's like, oh, good, I'm glad it's not super dry, but I almost can't get rid of that clammy feeling when it's like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
what is that like, man? Like I remember playing shortstop and dealing with that. It was almost like you kind of three finger it and throw it across. Like you don't have to worry about it as much as a fielder.
Yeah, it was, just never, yeah, just kind of the inconsistencies, like I guess just different parts of the country. Like in JUCO, you're talking about it was, we played really cold games in Florida too, where it was like that, the wind, the breeze, and everything, real windy, kind of, just that more like clammy feeling as opposed to like being in the Midwest where it's a little more dry. It's just a
Yep.
different feel. And I think the biggest thing is just when you're talking about trying to be successful in these conditions, it's just having the experience in them is a lot of it. Like having pitched in those similar conditions somewhat recently. It's hard in college because wrap up the fall and the weather's beautiful. It's like great weather, everything's good, and then you come back and a lot of times it's freezing cold. You're not really getting outside much. I remember um, particularly in when I was at SEMO, like we didn't get outside. We got outside maybe one time before our opening series at
Yeah.
Alabama.
Yeah.
And then we played well that series. The weather was good. And then we had to come back. We came back and we played Purdue in the cold, a doubleheader, and that was kind of that game that really sticks out in my mind. I started the second game.
Yeah.
And I just remember like sitting up in the box, like keeping the pitching coach was like, "All right, I'm gonna let you, chart pitches up in the scores box for the first game." And I just can remember being like, "This is kind of cool being up here. Like it's I'm comfortable." But I was still just like, I knew how cold it looked out there and like
Got in
how
your head a
cold it
little bit.
was. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, man, like I got, I'm just kind of sitting there, charting pitches and like, I got to go out in this. Like,
Yeah. The mental piece is huge, man. Like this happened to me. We played this was back at Capitol freshman year. Played a doubleheader at Wittenberg in Ohio. And this is like at the time in the season where, that year I was a shortstop, but there was a fifth year senior who was playing a lot of shortstop early on, and I was kind of bouncing around playing left field, center field, right field, third base, second base, and then it was kind of that time where I was starting to move into that shortstop role a little bit. So a lot of times, like I would play center field the first game of a doubleheader, and then go play shortstop the second game. And we used to do like these 9 inning, 7 inning games, 9 sevens, for the double headers.
right. We did that in JUCO.
And I didn't like it, but that's besides the point. And,
Mm-hmm.
I remember, playing center field that first game, having a decent game, cold as all get out, but then getting penciled in as the shortstop the second game. I'm like, oh God, like my arm hasn't been going. I'm cold. Like you get that like back of the knees, hamstring tightness when it's cold. And I had to like take my pants off, put my cup on, because I didn't wear a cup in the outfield. And I remember taking the pants off and the wind's hitting you. God, couldn't wait to get the cup on and get the pants back on. And I didn't play good. Like I might have made an error or whatever, but I just remember sitting there and being like, I'm freezing. Like all I could think about was how cold I was. That was one of the games that snowed. And I remember it was like the seventh inning. I think we were winning. We were up big, like 6-1. Whoever was our closer then, he needed some work. So he came into the game to get some work. He hadn't thrown, because we had missed a couple weeks before that, I think. So he came into work and just laid a 86-mile-an-hour fastball right down the middle. Dude hits a 106-mile-an-hour ground ball right at me. one of them zingers on the ground, and I'd whoop did one of these just right underneath my glove, and we get back on the bus after the game. It's the heat is just blasting on the bus. Everybody's cold, everybody's quiet, and our coach comes on the intercom, and he would always like kind of rag people a little bit, just kind of get the morale up on the way home. And one of the first things he goes, well, since Bartek thought it was better for the left fielder to pick up that hot ground ball there at the end of the game, we're going to make him sit outside in the cold for a little bit longer. And I was just like, dang it, man. And he was obviously joking, but it was, just miserable conditions, man. I know Dale's told his story about us playing. This is when I was coaching, going to University of the Ozarks in Arkansas, and air temperature was, I think, 34.
I played a cold game.
Wind chill was
Arkansas
23
one time. Yeah.
Wind chill was 23. There were 20-mile-an-hour winds with up to 30-mile-an-hour gusts. So I was hitting fungos. I was the outfield fungo guy for pregame when I was volunteer coaching. And we had another guy that I played with. He was also a volunteer. Kevin McConnell was his name. Big old dude. He was our DH when I played there. Strong as all get out. So I'm hitting the fungos, and I'm hitting my normal pop fly fungos, and they're going up and flying back like 60 feet out in front. I couldn't get them out there.
Well, that's the other factor that we haven't talked about is the wind, which can really have a major impact on when you're pitching, just, whether it's, holding the breaking ball up to where it just doesn't really want to break, or, maybe it's blowing the two-seamer out of the zone, change-ups kind of blowing out of the zone. It's, and that's the other thing that it can.
Oh, yeah, makes a big difference.
Typically, you're not going to have to deal with the wind when it's more moderate temperature. I mean, the wind can be.
But when it's cold, man, it almost has double effect.
Right.
Like making that temperature feel colder.
The wind chill factor.
And then also what it does to the rest of the game, too. But I remember having to get K-Mac. He had to hit I was like, dude, you got to hit these far. I can't get it out there. Can't hit it far enough. And. Dale tells the story, he actually didn't start that game, and he came in late as a defensive replacement. And, like, right off the bat, same thing that happened to me my freshman year at Wittenberg, 2 balls hit right to him, and he's just like, I couldn't feel my hands. Like, I could not feel what was going on. And, yeah, man, like those cold weather games, man.
Come into the
rough.
game as a defensive replacement. Yeah, the ball always finds you.
Oh, yeah, 100%, man. 100%.
Yeah.
So, no, I
mean, I think, I don't know. I guess I was never, like, the most well-prepared. Thinking back, I'm like, I don't even think I really had hot hands. Just.
We prepared awful then. Like, I don't
college kids, like, maybe when I was younger, maybe the team mom would say, here's some hot hands, and then.
Well, we usually found our way to the hot hands. It was like, I don't think I had a pair of leggings until college.
Well, I didn't have leggings until after college, I feel like.
And
like they weren't really.
You had cold gear and stuff like that, but like. I think my senior year we got some big jackets for in the dugout. But dude, I remember just like battling through it. Like you just with these thin shirt you got on there, just battling through it, and it's like, no wonder we were freezing cold,
Well, yeah, no,
this doesn't even get into just the lack of preparation prior to with your warm ups and what you're doing and stuff like that. It's like. It was almost like the tough guy.
No foam rollers.
Right. Well, it was like the coach's thing was like.
Foam rolling would have been nice back then.
Well, but not even foam rolling, but it was like the tough guy mentality to nope. This is how we prepare all the time. This is how we're gonna, even though it's cold. This is how we're doing it.
Right.
And it's like, Well, no, there's probably a better way we could have done it. Spend a little bit more time on the warm up. Spend a little bit more time doing some things to get the body
A
temperature up.
little less time between the warm up and the game.
Exactly, and I don't ever remember making those compensations. And I understand that from a planning and a toughness and a mentality perspective. But in terms of like an actual core temperature heating up perspective, like no, like it was awful. Like
Yeah.
I remember doing a lot of stuff on my own to get my core temperature up, but it's just like, yep, we're just going to do the same thing we always do, and we're going to battle through it, and we're going to be sick next week because of it, and like, so I think a lot of coaches can probably do a better job of that, like just preparing their guys. Hey guys, know that it's going to be this temperature. Might not be a bad idea to eat this, this, and this. Might not be a bad idea to prepare beforehand with this, this, and this. Whether that's what you're wearing, what you're eating, what you're drinking, how you're hydrated. You see all these guys that would cramp up and stuff too, and it's like, you got to get the salt tablets out.
You don't
it's like,
think you really, you don't
think you need to drink anything. You're not thirsty
when it's so that cold, but it actually dehydrates you.
It does,
more, right?
Especially when the wind is rocking too. You play those games where your lips are chapped and your hands are cracking.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of remember, man. Just like, like just hands almost, just real dry. The ball was so dry.
Yep.
And just like no moisture. Some of those games, like, just the grip.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely not a cold weather person, but for all you guys that are getting ready to start your season in cold weather, like, this is what's up ahead. You can't just ignore it. You have to know, and that's why we've done so much work with our guys in here right now, working on the sprint frequency, working on getting the arms in shape, doing what we're supposed to do, ramping up and ramping down, because you can't show up on the day of with 33-degree temperatures and expect
it's going to be frigid
right.
at tryouts.
So your body has to be conditioned for these things ahead of time, because it's already bad enough that you got to play in the cold, and the results are probably going to suffer a little from that. Last thing you want to do is get hurt because you're dealing with the cold as well. So we do a lot of work this time of year with our guys to make sure they're prepared for whatever those game vigors are going to be. Just early on the hamstring pulls, early on just the tight hips, early on the arm soreness, like trying to get ahead of that stuff before the weather is actually a factor. That's a huge piece as well.
Just having an efficient routine that you kind of, it's one thing like when the weather's nice, your warm up's gonna look a little bit different. You're gonna be out there smiling, maybe trying it up, like taking your time maybe a little more with your warm up. When it's cold, it's like you probably just want to get it done.
Yeah.
Just.
But that's almost when you have to challenge yourself to be a little bit more diligent.
More, right. A little more disciplined, yeah.
And not necessarily do more, but just do better. Like, do it better. Do it better. Do it more effectively.
Yeah, and I think, just something I'm thinking about is like, the indoors now, like, makes a little bit of a difference, I'm sure. Like, I remember my senior year playing in probably the coldest game we played in. Up in Nashville, we had an indoor where we kind of just took BP.
Yeah,
I was able to kind of warm up in there, do my bands and everything in there, and then just kind of go out to the field, throw, and because a lot of it is just the duration that gets to you after a while. I mean, it's like it's one thing to be in the cold for an hour, it's another thing to be in it for 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's just, it really, over time, it starts.
You remember getting done with those days, if you had a doubleheader, especially, and like once you had time to actually thaw out, take a shower, relax from it, how hungry you used to be. Like, that's what I remember. I remember just being like absolutely, because you're shivering, you're
right, it just zaps your energy.
You're trying so hard to stay warm, and just, man, you get You finally get back, you get warm, you get a shower, and it's like, I just want to eat a house right now. Like I'm starved. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Right. Right.
And
Just kind of
nothing was as good as that hot meal.
dehydrated, like
Yeah.
yeah, almost like you just like some dehydrated meat,
Yeah.
just kind of like shrinks you down. You feel like, yeah, you could eat a
Yep. Nope.
horse. Yeah.
100%. So, Greg, go ahead and give the pitchers listening just some tips and pointers for, staying trying to keep themselves warm and prepare, as they're getting ready, especially to pitch live to hitters, like when games start up again, inter squads early in the season, whether it's college or high school guys, like some things that they need to pay attention to. I know we touched on the warm up, touched on the preparation, but just kind of like once you get in game, I know there's all the rules and regulations about, blowing on the fist and wiping the finger and all the stuff, but just some things that helped you, on those
I would
days.
say one big thing, would be like, just making sure that it's like you talked about, like we didn't have all these layers maybe that we were permitted to, that we had, or that if we'd have had them, we probably wouldn't have been permitted to wear them anyways.
Right.
It's a lot more leniency now. You never saw guys wearing hoodies when we were playing, but now you see guys wearing hoodies under their jerseys all the time. But I would say, one big thing that's coming to mind is, for me, is like doing a better job of kind of like gear testing. Like, don't go out there all layered up or something. If that's not how you practice, like know what you're gonna wear, and kind of test it out. Like, make sure you're comfortable. Make sure you kind of just need to get comfortable in whatever you're wearing. If you see guys in the pros, these pitchers that they don't wear sleeves,
Right.
and I think part of that is just because
They don't like the
the
way it
big
feels.
part is they don't like wearing sleeves.
Right. They've never worn them when it's warm, so they're not going to do it when it's cold.
Right.
Yeah.
So and that's not to say obviously you're going to have something to put on your arm between innings. Make sure you have a warm jacket to put on between innings. But I would just making sure that you're taking care of your fingernails and everything. That's something that I think is often overlooked. Making sure that you've got your hand, you've got some moisturizer or something to keep some moisture in your hands. Blowing in the hands. Maybe sneak a little something, dab of pine tar. Maybe I would, if I could go back.
Yeah, probably a lot easier
like,
to get away with it back then than it is.
Right.
I mean, even now, I guess, and not that we're condoning you guys, sneaking pine tar, but even in high school and college, I'm sure it still happens. I'm sure guys are still doing it. So, no, for hitters, for position players, especially catchers, you're a little bit different. But the biggest thing for you guys is being able to make sure you can make efficient throws still. Ball comes to you, it might be wet, it might be cold, it might be dry, whatever it is. You got to be able to throw efficiently still. So you said something about testing your gear. Well, you guys in cold temperatures in practice need to test this stuff. Like, test your quick throws, test your pressure situations. You need to be able to grip a ball with 3 fingers if needed, to grab some seams and let it rip. Understand what it's like throwing a wet ball. Throwing some other types of balls often can help this, like practice and throw, not necessarily a tennis ball, but some plyo balls when it's cold. Throwing, like position players throwing plyo balls. Understanding grip is going to be the biggest thing. And then for hitters, man, it's just like, for me, there was nothing you were going to be able to do if you were cold. The bat was going to feel crappy. Your hands were going to feel crappy. The batting gloves felt cold. Like, nothing felt right. But as a hitter, for me, like, the number one thing was trying to immerse myself in the detail. because that got your mind off of how cold it was and how bad you felt. So, like, pay attention to situations, study what's going on with the other hitters, study what's going on with the pitchers, look at scouting reports. Doing those things can help you kind of take your mind off it a little bit.
Yeah.
And same thing in the field. If you're playing outfield and you know you're only going to get 2 balls and you might not have to make a single throw, pay attention to where to play. Talk to your guy, talk to your corner guys, positioning guys, moving guys around, keeping up chatter. I know that sounds cliche, but that helps. That it just helps take your mind off it, you know. And then for catchers, I think they have a little bit of an advantage because they're constantly in the game, moving.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a little bit
some
different
extra
for them.
with some gear,
A little bit of
on,
gear,
it
right?
helps
So
a little bit.
you know, engaging with the umpire again, just things to try to keep your mind off of actually how cold it is. You know, so as you guys head into the season,
That's true.
yeah, pay attention to those things. But really, guys, there's no substitute for when it gets cold out and it's early in your spring seasons and you're practicing. Just get used to it. Like, embrace all the uncomfortable stuff. A lot of times it's easy to just say, well, it's practice, so I'm just cold and I'm not focused right now. Focus on that.
And you just kind of, you know, and yeah, you just kind of sit back with
it'll
your
warm
hands
up.
in your pants,
Yeah.
and you just like, let me just get. I'm just gonna get through this,
Yep.
and you're not really thinking about it like, well, you know, I need to prepare for when we're gonna probably somewhere along the line we're gonna play a game in this crap, you know.
Yep.
So,
That's the best preparation right there. So if you guys like this content, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. All you guys that are getting ready to open up your seasons in cold weather, good luck. Another episode from the Juice Box Athletic Podcast Baseball Development Show. We'll catch you guys soon.